The world has long been fascinated by true crime, but few cases are as deeply disturbing as those involving mothers, who not only orchestrated the brutal murders of their own families, but also had the audacity to play the grieving victim on live television. These psycho moms didn't just commit unspeakable crimes, they craved the spotlight and manipulated the media and the public with fake tears. First up, we have Tanya Tripp, who for months claimed to be a cancer-stricken mom, who longed for her missing 16-year-old daughter to be found and returned home. In reality, she knew exactly where her daughter was the entire time. Then we have Amy Vilardi, who went on live TV to complain that the quadruple homicide involving her family wasn't being solved fast enough, only to later be the one arrested and charged for it. Finally, we have Samantha Wohlford, a stay-at-home mom who was longing for a more exciting life. She thought that staging a home invasion and her husband's murder would be the way to get it. Unfortunately for her, she ended up in a cell block instead. The day of Janelle Cardwell's 16th birthday celebration should have been one of the best days of her life. Instead, it was her last. Janelle, a hardworking honor roll student who dreamed of becoming a doctor, had spent her 16th birthday with close friends and family. It was a joyous day, filled with laughter, food, and celebration. Until just hours later, she vanished into the night without a trace. What followed was a web of lies, deception, and a horrifying truth that took over a year to uncover. In the early morning hours after her birthday celebration, Janelle's mother, Tanya Tripp, made a frantic call to 911. She reported that both her daughter and her husband, Janelle's stepfather, Leon Tripp, had disappeared. According to Tanya, Leon had received a late-night call from a friend in need. The friend's car had reportedly broken down in Clarks Hill, South Carolina, about 30 minutes away from their home in Augusta, Georgia. Leon had left the house to assist, and Janelle had gone with him to help navigate using her phone's GPS.
I've been calling and texting and leaving messages and nothing.
Of course, this story already sounds pretty odd. What kind of stepfather would take his 16-year-old daughter out in the middle of the night to help a stranger with a car problem? But Tanya insisted that this was what happened. She also said that Leon had not called her to let her know that he had arrived, something he had promised he would do.
I told him, I said, well, when you on your way back, honey, please call me and let me know that y'all okay. And he said, all right.
At first, Tanya seemed as confused and distressed as any mother would be. She pleaded for help, even going live on social media, and stated that she had not been able to reach either Leon or Janelle for hours. 2 weeks passed, and there was still no sign of Janelle or Leon. The community rallied together, desperate for answers. Tanya Tripp took to social media, begging for help in finding her daughter, revealing in a heart-wrenching post that she was battling both lung and brain cancer.
I do have cancer. I have brain cancer and I have lung cancer.
She says this is what had prevented her from accompanying her husband and daughter the night of Janelle's disappearance.
And I was inhaling too much of the smoke, so my husband told me to go in the house and lay down. So I did. And first thing he said was, baby, I'm sorry. He said, I got Janelle. He said, I got her to ride along with me because I didn't want to bother you because you were sick. He said, I was going to ask you, but you were sick, but I didn't want to bother you. And he said, I asked her to ride with me to help with the GPS because he is not no technology person. He's not. And 3, 4, 5, 6 o'clock, I'm calling, texting, nothing. And that's one thing they not going to do is ignore my call when they see me call. At all.
Despite the public sympathy Tanya garnered, investigators were beginning to notice troubling details. First, Leon's story didn't add up. Phone records showed that neither he nor Janelle had ever been in Clarks Hill that night. Their phones never even left Augusta. Then, a shocking development emerged. Leon Tripp had been spotted, alive and well, more than 100 miles away in Atlanta, but without Janelle. Further investigation revealed that he had been staying with friends there, making multiple trips back and forth, while the cops were actively searching for both him and Janelle. As detectives dug deeper into Leon Tripp's past, they uncovered a disturbing history. He had a criminal record that included charges of aggravated assault and cruelty to children. At the time he met Tanya, he had been serving time in prison. The two had struck up a relationship while he was incarcerated, eventually marrying and making plans for their future together. When he was released, he moved straight into the Cardwell family home with Tanya, Janelle, and Janelle's younger sister. Despite Leon's criminal past, Tanya had fiercely defended him, standing by his side even as he became the prime suspect in her daughter's disappearance.
In my heart and mind, I feel like he didn't kidnap our daughter.
This Augusta stepfather went from missing with his stepdaughter to being her accused kidnapper.
These kids go with their dad all the time. So you mean to tell me every time they go somewhere with him, it's a kidnapping? Just because I didn't know it the second that he left with her?
When the cops issued a warrant for Leon's arrest on kidnapping charges, they were stunned to find that Tanya was not just defending him, she was actively helping him evade capture. Investigators finally tracked Leon down at a U-Haul facility in Atlanta, but he wasn't alone. To their shock, Tanya was right there beside him. The woman who had spent months pleading for her daughter's safe return had been helping the man responsible for Janelle's disappearance all along. Immediately, investigators got a bad feeling that the investigation was likely not heading in the direction that they had hoped. It was quickly seeming less and less likely that Janelle would ever be found alive. Didn't buy it. She was immediately arrested and charged with hindering the apprehension of a criminal. At this point, the case took a heartbreaking turn. Investigators no longer believed they were dealing with a missing person case. They now thought they were looking at a homicide. Months passed, and Janelle remained missing. But detectives were closing in on the truth. Leon, now in custody, eventually provided a devastating confession. He claimed that Janelle was no longer alive. He did not reveal specific details about what happened that night, but the case had officially shifted from a search and rescue mission to a homicide investigation. Then, in a tragic twist of fate, the long search for Janelle came to a heartbreaking end. More than a year after her disappearance, a homeowner in Augusta made a grisly discovery. It was a bone protruding from the ground in the backyard of a vacant house. Investigators quickly confirmed that the remains belonged to Janelle Carwell. Her body had been hidden in a shallow grave, just miles from where she had lived. With the discovery of Janelle's remains, both Leon Tripp and Tanya Tripp faced murder charges. Leon was also charged with kidnapping with bodily injury and cruelty to children in the first degree. The entire community, who had once been so sympathetic to Tanya, was horrified by these revelations. One of Tanya's closest friends called her in jail, painted herself as a grieving mother, and a cancer-stricken victim desperate to find her daughter had instead been complicit in covering up the crime. Even worse, she had deceived those who had donated money to support her search efforts. One of the most disturbing parts of this tragedy is the betrayal Janelle suffered at the hands of the person meant to protect her the most. Investigators believe that Tanya knew from the very beginning that her daughter would never be found alive. Her 911 call, initially seen as a frantic plea for help, was later determined to be a carefully constructed lie. It was literally designed to mislead authorities and buy time for Leon to cover his tracks. Adding to the deception, detectives discovered that Tanya's claims of having brain and lung cancer were completely made up. The desperate mother persona she had created was nothing more than an act. She had only been trying to get public sympathy, while she secretly stood by the man who had taken her daughter's life. Despite the fact that both Tanya and Leon Tripp were arrested and charged with murder, justice has still not yet been served for Janelle. The trial was set to begin in March of 2024, but ended up being delayed and has not yet been reset. If convicted of the murder charges they're facing, both Tanya and Leon could end up being sentenced to prison for the rest of their lives. On Halloween night in 2015, a gruesome crime rocked the small town of Pendleton, South Carolina. 4 family members, Kathy Scott, Michael Scott, Violet Taylor, and Barbara Scott, were all brutally stabbed and shot to death inside their home. Days later, on November 2nd, a frantic 911 call came in from a woman named Amy Vilardi, who claimed she had walked into the home and accidentally stumbled upon the horrifying scene. For years, investigators were baffled by this case and had no major leads. Who could commit such an unspeakable act, and why?
I keep feeling like I should be waking up from a dream right now, and it's just not happening. So yeah, it's like a movie or something. It's not supposed to be real life.
Fast forward 8 years, and in a shocking turn of events, Amy Vilardi and her husband, Rossmore Vilardi, were arrested and charged with 4 counts of murder.
Experts say Amy Vilardi, who once gave TV interviews about the horrific crime, could soon have her own words thrown back into her face.
It was a crazy turn. The very woman who had once spoken to news cameras about the tragedy, demanding justice for her slain family, was now the one in handcuffs. In March 2023, Amy and Rossmore were officially named persons of interest. Then, in December, they were finally taken into custody. What new evidence had surfaced after all these years? Investigators aren't yet saying. Criminal defense experts speculate that authorities might not even have new evidence, just enough to push forward with a case that had gone cold. The main question that remains is whether the prosecution's case is strong enough. There is also the question of a motive, or seemingly lack of one. Why would Amy and Rossmore kill Amy's own mother, stepfather, grandmother, and step-grandmother? Rumors swirled for years about family disputes, money troubles, and bad blood, including a $60,000 dispute over seized assets.
Here we go. Another fun-filled day with a narcissistic family.
But without a clear-cut motive, could the prosecution convince a jury? Lots of people have family disputes, but few end up resorting to murder. Who will believe that Amy is truly responsible for this? Amy's own words from interviews she gave back in 2015 could now be used against her in court.
I understand, there again, they've got a job to do, but sometimes as family members, we want answers. And we just want to know what's going on.
She criticized the cops for not solving the case sooner. This was a move that legal experts say is not typical of a guilty person.
If you were talking directly to the person, do you want to look in the camera and just say exactly what you would say to that person?
I can't say that on TV.
Could these statements work in her favor, or will they seal her fate? Meanwhile, the Attorney General's office has taken over the case, an unusual move that raises even more questions. Why did the local prosecutor step aside? Was there a conflict of interest, or did some officials doubt the strength of the charges? Amy's defense team claims that they have received very little information about what Amy's charges are based on.
Address the facts of this case because, quite frankly, we don't have discovery. We haven't received anything. There is nothing in the arrest warrant. There's nothing in the indictment to give us any indication of what the facts are, so I can't address them at this point. They have been arrested now for 2 months, and we have not gotten anything.
At least for now, both Amy and Rossmore remain behind bars without bond, awaiting their next court date on February 20th. If convicted, they could face life in prison. But with a case this cold, a lack of clear evidence, and a lingering mystery, one thing is certain: this trial will be one that many will be tuning in to watch. Was this a case of justice finally served, or a desperate prosecution grasping at straws? The truth will soon unfold in court. In the dead of night, on February 20th, 2015, a frantic 911 call was received in Mount Pleasant, Texas.
Titus County 911, what's your emergency?
I have a home invasion. My niece is tied up.
She's tied up.
She is tied up and gagged.
Samantha Wohlford, a 29-year-old YouTuber and aspiring influencer, claimed she had just survived a horrific home invasion. Her story was chilling. She claimed that masked men had stormed into her home, tied her up, and kidnapped her husband, Ernie Ibarra. Authorities rushed to the scene, but something about Samantha's version of events didn't add up. As they began to look closer at this disturbing case, they uncovered something shocking. Samantha Wohlford wasn't a victim at all, but the mastermind of a cold-blooded murder. If you take a deeper look at the marriage of Samantha Wohlford and Ernie Ibarra, one of the first things you'll notice is that their marriage was in major trouble.
I have a dad with me. Don't get me wrong, I love the boy to death. But he and I have a lot of problems. Like, of course I love him to death. We have kids together. But he and I have a lot of problems.
This is just a video, I guess, trying to tell you, learn to appreciate the things that you have in life.
While Samantha dreamed of internet fame, posting selfies and makeup tutorials, Ernie worked long hours at a printing company, struggling to provide for their 3 children. Their marriage was far from perfect, and Samantha's resentment toward Ernie had been getting worse by the day. She was craving a better life.
It's a little... yeah. No, I'm not exactly excited about this. Have been on birth control.
Instead of looking for a way out, she started plotting her husband's demise. Investigators soon discovered that Samantha had orchestrated the entire attack. She had convinced 3 of her friends that Ernie was an abusive husband who needed to be taken care of. By playing the role of a damsel in distress, she manipulated them into carrying out a brutal and premeditated attack. That fateful night, the 3 men broke into the Ibarra home, beat Ernie mercilessly, tied him up, and dragged him away. Samantha, to sell her innocence, allowed them to tie her up as well. This was all to make it seem like she was just another helpless victim. But her story crumbled fast. Just hours after the attack, the cops discovered Ernie Ibarra's lifeless body on a desolate road in the Texas countryside. He had been shot execution style, and his body was left to rot in the dirt. As detectives pressed Samantha for answers, her inconsistencies piled up. Her emotions seemed forced, and her timeline didn't match. Also, when the whole home invasion happened, she called her mom first instead of 911.
My mother was the first number on my call list. I just used my face. And
so instead of calling 911 for help, you called your mother?
How do you press 911 with your face?
Well, how did you dial your mother with your face?
I didn't dial my mother. I just pushed the first thing that was on there. It had just happened to be my mom.
I think you know exactly who did this. I think the story's made up about your daddy, his daddy, and stuff like that. And I think you know exactly who did this, and I think you're scared.
But the final nail in the coffin that sealed her fate was probably the most shocking thing of all. Samantha's 3 accomplices quickly turned on her and revealed how she had been the puppet master behind the entire thing. Samantha Wohlford was arrested and charged with capital murder, kidnapping, and aggravated assault. During the trial, prosecutors exposed her selfish motives. She wanted Ernie gone so she could live a carefree life, free from responsibility. But instead of the glamorous future she envisioned, Samantha was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Clearly, it was not the life of fame and fortune that she had been hoping for. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Until next time, sleep tight.